I just want to draw your attention to the image of the saint in the medallion in the center there, which in this particular form, friends, was established in 1880, okay? But the inscriptions in Latin on the medallion go back to at least the 15th century, around the time of the, 1415 in Bavaria. So before I address those, let me tell you a little bit more about the life of St Benedict. St Benedict is a very transitionary figure. He was born in 480, so 3 years after the fall of the Western Roman Empire to the barbarians, to the Goth Genseric, who ousted the very last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, who was merely a boy, reigning from or ruling from the city of Ravenna in northern Italy. So that happened in 476. That was the end of Roman administration in Western Europe, although the Eastern Roman Empire persisted in the capital city of Constantinople, New Rome. Benedict was born in 480 to a Roman prefect and patrician, noble family, and he was sent to Rome itself to study. Now you can imagine 3 years after the fall, or 4 years after the fall of the empire he's born, in the decades that ensued, Rome had become, the city of Rome itself had become a bit of a cesspool. And so he was shocked by what he saw there, the immorality, the avarice, the violence, the prostitution. And so he decided to leave. He got some studies done, some good studies, but he left. And he went in a way that's characteristic of a lot of these spiritual elders, you know, going all the way back to St Anthony the Great of Egypt, the very first, the father of monasticism, who left for very similar reasons the world in order to retreat, in his case, into the Egyptian desert. He went 40 miles east of Rome, St Benedict, to Subiaco, and in Subiaco he found a spiritual elder, Romanus, and Romanus encouraged him with paternal affection to undertake the life of a hermit. And so for 3 years he dwelt in a cave in Subiaco, undertaking very strict asceticism. So fighting against the passions which are natural to the body, soul, matrix or constitution that, let's say, are the impetus for our objects of desire and attachments. Okay, he fought against the passions by fasting, by prayer, by meditation, in order to become the self-sacrificial spiritual giant in imitation of Christ that he would become. While he was in the cave, he was visited by shepherds that, you know, would offer him food. His spiritual father would come from time to time to see how he was going, and he would give him food for his sustenance. And he knew that he had nothing to really give these shepherds who'd come and visit him except to teach them about Christ, which brought them a lot of spiritual joy. Eventually, in a nearby monastery, the abbot, from the word ava, which is Hebrew for father, right? The abbot is the head of a monastery. The abbot of a local monastery died, and the monks, knowing St Benedict's reputation for holiness, entreated him desperately to come and become their new abbot. He was reluctant because he knew about the reputation of this monastery, that they were a little bit idiorhythmic and idiosyncratic, and there were disputes among them. Nevertheless, he assented, and he went to the monastery, and they tried to kill him. Sorry, it's not funny. It's just a little bit like, you know, what happens thereafter is funny. What they tried to do is poison his chalice, because he began to employ what would become characteristic of what we know as the Benedictine Rule, or the Rule of St Benedict, that he doesn't write formally until towards the end of his life in the 540s, right? So this is still in around the turn of the 500s, let's say, but it's characterized by moderation. It's a moderate ascetical discipline to prevail in the monasteries. Ora et labora, prayer and works, okay? And he usually applied what they call in the Greek tradition economia. So economy as opposed, or in contrast to akrivia or strictness. he would try to tailor things to the personal circumstances of his monks, but he still maintained a standard. You're a monk, you need to pray, you need to work. Okay. That way you glorify God. That way you're a spiritual benefit to yourself and to others. Some of the monks thought he was too harsh, and so they poisoned his drinking chalice at dinner. They put poison in it, and St Benedict, as was custom, gave the blessing over the food and the wine, the drink, and the chalice holding the poisoned drink shattered. Okay, and so if you look at him in this image here, you'll see him. Usually he's got a chalice. There it is on the left-hand side. That's the chalice that they tried to poison. Another time, a nearby priest who was also very envious of St Benedict, Florentius, something like that. I'll correct it in the video at the bottom. Also tried to kill him. And what he did was he poisoned some bread. And there was a raven that St Benedict will often feed, and so when he was about to partake of this bread, it came and took it away and saved him. So if you look at the image again, you'll see the raven on the right hand side of Benedict there. He's holding the cross and the book which represents his rule that he wrote towards the end of his life, the Rule of St Benedict. Now, it occurred to me as I was reading about his life that this poisoned chalice and poisoned bread represent a kind of an anti-Eucharist, actually. An anti-Eucharist which, because it comes out of envy and strife and try to destroy the saint, is demonic or satanic. And that brings us to the medal itself and what's written on it in Latin. Usually this medal has an obverse side, and on the obverse side is a cross, and the cross has the following inscriptions. Let me just tell you what they are, and I'll put an image of the cross up so that you can see. So what you'll usually see is Crux Sancti Patris Benedicti, okay, the cross of Holy Father Benedict. And if you look up there, you can see it there as well. Crux Est for Sancti Patris Benedicti written on either side of them. Sometimes this is put within the four corners of the cross, okay, where the arms of the cross are, above and beneath, right? And then you have the initials on the vertical and horizontal bars of the cross, which say the following. So, Crux, well, they're usually in acronyms. So CSSML, Crux Sacra sit mihi lux, nunquam, Crux Sacra sit mihi lux, which is, make the Holy Cross be my light. And then, nunquam Draco sit mihi dux, may the dragon never be my overlord. Okay, Draco is from dragon, which is one of the ways that the devil is described in the book of Revelation as Odrakon, which is related to Ophis, the Greek word for serpent. These are the Greek terms that translate into Latin. Drakon becomes Draco or Draco, not Malfoy from the Harry Potter series, all right? So the medal is considered a protection against the demonic forces. On this particular one, have a look again, and you will see around the circumference of the medallion, you have some Latin as well, and let me just read it out to you here. It's Eus in obitu nostro presentia muniamur. Okay, you can see it there, right? And what that means, what that translates to in English is, may we be strengthened by his, that's the Lord's presence, in the holy hour of death. So the medallion, of course, comes from a much later period in the life of St Benedict. Anyway, after 2 attempts on his life in Subiaco, he leaves Subiaco and he moves to Monte Cassino, which is to the south of Rome, and that's where his monastic rule flourishes even more. He did establish 12 monasteries of 12 monks each in Subiaco before he left for Monte Cassino. In Monte Cassino, the monastery and the kind of order, a monastic order that is deployed by St Benedict thrives. As part of their ascetic discipline, the monks transcribe texts coming out of classical antiquity. So the reason why we have Virgil, for example, preserved in Latin, his Aeneid, and all these other texts, right, Cicero and everything else, is partly because of the ascetical labor of these monks who transcribe these texts in a beautiful script as part of their ascetic discipline. And that's where, towards the end of his life in 543, in the middle 6th century, St Benedict wrote his rule. And the rule is important for monks to follow. It's based on previous rules. He himself had read the rule of St Pachomius, who was a disciple of St Anthony the Great, the father of Egyptian monasticism. Benedict had also read the rule of St Basil of Caesarea, who codified monasticism in the eastern territories, what's known as his ascetikon, so on asceticism. And basically, monks had to come in one of two categories. In the first instance, they had to come under the obedience to an abbot, and in that way they learnt the spiritual discipline of submitting their own will to the will of the abbot, who's always under a bishop. So they fall within the hierarchy of the church this way. And if they exceed in zeal and spiritual charism, then they may be given the blessing to become an anchorite, from Greek hora, outside of a place. An anchorite is basically a hermit, someone who can basically live on their own and undertake the monastic life as a hermit. Not entirely divorced from people, but still, living a life predominantly of spiritual solitude between themselves and God. Wandering monks were frowned upon. They were frowned upon in Basil's day, and Benedict was the same. He died in 543 on Holy Thursday evening in a state of prayer, holding his arms up to the Lord and saying, "I wish to go to heaven." So that's the life of St Benedict very briefly. Oh, there's the other side. Sorry, there's the other side of the medallion. I don't mean to cut you off.
That's right.
It's right there for us to see. You can see the CSSML. Crux sacra sit mihi lux. Right? May the Holy Cross be my light. Here, on the vertical bar of the cross, and on the transverse bar, in other words the horizontal bar, you can see NDSMD. Nunquam draco sit mihi dux. May the dragon never be my overlord. And all the way around it, you can see various acronyms. Well, it's here. It begins here on the right. There's Pax piece at the top. Let's read that one out too, Chris, because I didn't do that earlier. It's VRS, which you can see, NSMV, SMQLIVB. And that is a Latin prayer. Vade retro satana, nunquam suade mihi vana, sut mala quae libas, ipse venena bibas, which translates to, "Begone, Satan, never tempt me with your vanities. What you offer me is evil, drink the poison yourself."